Scene 215, take one.
Nail-biting tension.
My spine turns to custard. I get goosebumpy all over.
Stars.
Don't you just love being famous?
Style.
On a night such as this, could any woman say no?
And speculation.
I don't know. It's a mystery.
As the countdown starts.
I don't want to go to bed. I could stay up all night.
Join Jonathan Ross for Film 99 with a special Oscar preview tomorrow, 10:15 BBC1.
This week on Crimewatch UK, how the peace of a Norfolk village was shattered by the double murder of mother and daughter, Constance and Janice. There was no sign of a struggle, no sign of a break-in,
Jan?
and no sign of a motive. Now it's your call. Crimewatch UK, Tuesday at 10 on BBC1.
Arsenal Coventry is BBC One's Match of the Day in 15 minutes after the news and sport, with Nicholas Witchell and Rob Bonnet.
Serbia ignores the threat of NATO airstrikes and sends more forces into Kosovo. Thousands of ethnic Albanians are on the move. They say they've been driven from their homes. The balloon that's beaten the world, and one of the pilots is British. And victories for Scotland and England in the Five Nations Championship. Good evening. The threat of NATO airstrikes appears to be having no effect on Serb forces in Kosovo. One day after the breakdown of peace talks and hours after the withdrawal of international observers, the Serbs were moving more forces into the province, and thousands of ethnic Albanians are reported to have been evicted from their homes.
On foot, with what little they could carry, they fled in their thousands today from central Kosovo. The foreign observers have only just left, but the international community's worst fears are already coming true. Some of these ethnic Albanians say they were driven out of their villages by Serbian special forces. They claim the faces of their attackers were hidden with black masks. They tell stories of terror and of death. Lots of them came into our house, this old man said. They hit my son on the back of his neck. I don't know if he's dead or alive, but I think they killed him. The foreign observers have left us. No one cares about us. His account cannot be confirmed, like so much else here now. No one was there to see. Some of the Serbian forces in action in central Kosovo today were visibly relishing their work. This soldier paused to kiss the mortar round he was about to fire. Tonight there is no way to have a full picture of what's happening here, but central Kosovo has been hit hard. Serbian forces have set up roadblocks on key routes and are trying to prevent access to many areas. It appears they want no witnesses for what may come next. Orla Gearan, BBC News, Pristina.
A British and a Swiss balloonist have completed the first non-stop balloon flight around the globe. Brian Jones and Bertrand Piccard made aviation history in their Breitling Orbiter 3 balloon. Their journey started 20 days ago in Switzerland. They've been flying at an altitude of 35,000 feet. 26,602 miles later, they crossed the finishing line in the skies above North Africa.
Fantastic, yeah, they crossed the coast of West Africa.
Through one last long night, a realization that success was within their grasp. Accelerating over the Sahara, Orbiter 3 soared ahead of schedule. Just after 10 this morning, champagne and tears of joy amongst the support team as a ballooning dream was realized.
Here we are, we've crossed the finish line and it seems quite unbelievable.
These, the first internet images of the moment Orbiter's pilots realized they'd beaten the odds. So there it is, the moment that the pilots and their support team have been praying for. 20 days in the air, the third attempt, and finally a successful completion of one of the last great aviation challenges. For the pilots, though, little time for celebration.
Well, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to phone back to the control room in a minute, and I'm going to tell my wife I love her, and then I'm going to have a cup of tea like any good Englishman.
Back home in the Wiltshire village of Wootton Bassett, Brian Jones's young family joined the rest of the community in toasting their local hero.
Cheers,
Well done, Dad. Congratulations.
I don't think the penny's quite dropped yet. He said, I know we've done it, but I'm not emotional until I read all the faxes that come through and the things people are saying, and it's so wonderful.
Messages flooding into Orbiter's control centre included congratulations from the competition.
This weekend we're going to celebrate their success, and I suspect personally I may well call it a day as far as ballooning challenge is concerned.
With fuel and adrenaline to spare, Orbiter 3 is expected to fly on, touching down in Egypt early tomorrow. Robert Hall, BBC News, Geneva.
People who were forced to leave villages along the coast of Caithness after a fire on board an offshore chemical tanker have been allowed to return to their homes. The blaze eventually burned itself out. A major alert was declared yesterday when the multi-tanker Scania caught fire. It was carrying 1,700 tonnes of highly explosive chemicals. The crew abandoned ship, the tankers being towed to Scapa Flow in the Orkneys. There's been more trouble at Lurgan in County Armagh, close to where the solicitor Rosemary Nelson was murdered on Monday. Gangs of youths hijacked 2 vans and a number of other vehicles and set them on fire on a railway line near a nationalist estate. The pilot of a passenger plane was forced to make an emergency landing at Geneva Airport after the plane's nose wheel failed to come down. Fire-retardant foam was sprayed on the runway and the pilot of the Iberia jet managed to lower the plane onto it safely. No one was hurt. The abstract painter Patrick Heron has died at his home in Cornwall. He was 79. Patrick Heron was one of the great figures of British art in the last 50 years, known for his use of light and colour. His abstract forms were influenced by his beloved Cornish landscapes, and he fought to protect it against development. The Plaid Cymru leader, David Wigley, has used his speech at the party's spring conference in Aberystwyth to launch a furious attack on the Labour Party. And he said his party should aim to form the government of Wales after May's elections, rather than see itself as a small opposition party.
Here in a town at the very edge of Wales, Plaid Cymru enjoys the kind of solid grassroots support it would love to see replicated in the rest of the country. Arriving in Aberystwyth to an enthusiastic welcome, and with less than 7 weeks to go before the elections for the Welsh Assembly, Plaid Cymru's president said that his is the only true party of Wales and the only one which understands the country's needs.
The whole logic of establishing a National Assembly for our country was to enable different policies to be adopted in Wales, to meet Welsh circumstances and to respond to Welsh aspirations. And if all we're going to get in Wales is a rerun of the policies being applied in London, what was the point of establishing the National Assembly in the first place?
Although these are the first major elections in which Plaid Cymru can genuinely compete for power, over the next few weeks they'll come under increasing attack from the other parties over just how far they intend to take devolution. Plaid Cymru should do well in these parts in May's Assembly elections, but the party knows it needs to make ground in the non-Welsh speaking parts of South and East Wales if it's to become a major force in the Welsh Assembly. Wira Davis, BBC News, Aberystwyth.
William Hague has opened the Conservatives' election campaign for the Scottish Parliament by attacking the party's opponents. In a speech in Perth, he described Scottish Labour members as Tony Blair's trained poodles and said the SNP wanted to isolate Scotland from the rest of the UK.
The Tories need to get the voters' attention somehow. They're still low in the polls, paying the price for opposing devolution. Today, William Hague's message was simple. The Tories had lost the argument and they had to make the Scottish Parliament work.
You know, the devolution argument has come and gone, and we're not going to reopen it. We're not going to let the Conservative Party be dragged into past elections.
All the Scottish parties are competing to seem more Scottish than the next. William Hague joined in. Scottish Tory policy would be made in Scotland, not dictated by London. On one Tory campaign theme, he was clear already.
This May, there's only one party in Scotland which says no new taxes and actually means it. No income tax rises, no backdoor taxes, no stealth taxes.
That went down well. In a contest that will be dominated by tax and spending policy, the appeal for people to vote for their wallets will be a key theme of the Tory campaign. Thanks to the new proportional voting system, the Tories are guaranteed some seats in the new Parliament, but there'll be no significant recovery until they convince the voters they've learned from their previous defeats. The signs are the voters may not be prepared to forgive and forget just yet. John Pinar, BBC News, Perth.
Now, with news of Rugby Union victories for England and Scotland, plus the rest of the day's sport, here's Rob Bonnet.
Yes, the boot of Johnny Wilkinson took England to a 21-10 victory over France at Twickenham today, while in a much more entertaining match at Murrayfield, Scotland beat Ireland by 30 points to 13. Those results mean England will clinch the Five Nations Championship with a grand slam if they beat Wales in their last match at Wembley. But if they lose, Scotland will be champions if they beat France in Paris.
Even before the start, it was clear to all that England were fired up for a match they considered crucial to their Grand Slam ambitions and their World Cup preparations. It was reflected in their rampaging start, which rocked the French back immediately and earned them a second-minute lead they were never to relinquish. Johnny Wilkinson's composure and accuracy repeated the dose 3 minutes later before France suffered the first of several hairline decisions to go against them, as Garbajosa was adjudged to have hit touch before grounding the ball. 9 points to the good at half-time, England's forward power maintained their control in the second half. But worryingly, they were still displaying a lack of penetration behind the scrum, together with handling fallibility. It seemed Jeremy Guscott had scored, but replays proved the officials right. He'd dropped the ball. Instead, England had to rely on the boot of 19-year-old Wilkinson, whose 7 successful penalties gave him a place in the England record books and sewed up victory. French consolation came with the game's only try from Comba in injury time, but by then they'd been conclusively beaten. Kevin Geary, BBC News.
Points come quickly at Murrayfield this season. Against Wales last month, Scotland scored within seconds. Today, Ireland were on their way in little more than a minute. David Humphreys won the chase to touchdown, although the referee had already awarded a penalty try for Scottish obstruction. But Scotland weren't knocked off balance. 5 minutes later, they too put points on the board. John Leslie's looping pass giving Cameron Murray the yard of space he needed for the first of his 2 tries. And as the frenetic first-half pace continued, Gregor Townsend put Scotland in front, Keith Wood's tackle just failing to prevent the score. 15-10 at half-time, after which Ireland found a formidable second wind, but sustained pressure yielded no more than 3 points. Scotland, meanwhile, with Townsend inspirational, wasted no opportunities. Murray's second try had widened the gap and victory was secured in the move of the match, finished off by lock forward Stuart Grimes to send Scotland to Paris next month brimming with confidence. Steve McCormack, BBC News.
Meanwhile, in Treviso, Wales overwhelmed Italy by 60 points to 21 in a friendly international. Just 18-16 ahead at half-time, Wales then dominated the second half, with winger Gareth Thomas scoring 4 of his side's match total of 7 tries. Football, and the Premiership champions Arsenal had the chance to move within 1 point of the current leaders Manchester United this afternoon. Their match against Coventry at Highbury, along with Blackburn versus Wimbledon, Leeds against Derby and Southampton versus Sheffield Wednesday, is featured on Match of the Day, which follows shortly. If you don't want to know the results, then look away now. In the nationwide First Division, Sunderland preserved their 12-point lead at the top with a 3-1 victory over Bolton at the Stadium of Light. Alan Johnston scored twice, once in each half. The top 6 remain unchanged. Ipswich stay second following their 1-0 win at West Bromwich Albion. Bradford won at Bristol City and Wolves won at Barnsley, while Birmingham drew at Huddersfield. In Scotland, Rangers had the opportunity to increase their lead at the top of the Premier League by winning at Dundee United. That game and Dunfermline versus St Johnstone are being shown on Sportscene after the news. Again, if you'd rather avoid knowing the results, then look away now. The 5-2 favourite Young Kenny was the winner of the main race of the day at Uttoxeter, the Midlands Grand National. Ridden by Brendan Powell, Young Kenny comfortably outstayed the opposition over the 4¼ mile course to win by 8 lengths. The 12-to-1 chance Call It a Day was second, ahead of Hollybank Buck. Finally, one result from the Super League tonight: Sheffield Eagles 20 points, London Broncos 26.
The main news tonight: Serbia has sent more forces into Kosovo despite the threat of NATO airstrikes. Thousands of ethnic Albanians have left their homes. That's it from Rob and from me. Good night.
talking about having guys lock and load weapons and put them in my face. The only thing that prevents them from pulling that trigger is the fact that I'm an honest man.
This man was part of an elite team.
The British understand that when a man puts on a uniform, he's got to put his life on the line.
But who were the UN weapons inspectors?
There were people associated with the mission who had functions which were not explained to the rest of us.
Panorama investigates the investigators.
The result is we are nowhere.
Monday at 10 on BBC1.
The weather now on BBC One with Michael Fish.
Good evening to you. Some wet weather on the way, I think, for all of us as these areas of low pressure weather fronts dive down from the northwest. Already the rain's gathering across Scotland and Northern Ireland. It's become heavier and more persistent during the course of the last few hours, and that rain will be working its way southwards through all parts during the rest of the night. The wind picking up at the same time, but at least it's going to be a fairly mild night. Lowest temperatures 4 or 5 degrees. By the morning, Western Scotland and Northern Ireland will be into a different regime, brighter with showers. The rest of the country starting off wet, some pretty heavy bursts of rain around. Very gradually, I think, during the morning, many other western and northern parts will tend to brighten up, but I think the outbreaks of rain are going to hold on into eastern England well into the evening. But some of the showers at the same time in the west turning out to be quite heavy, a little bit of hail, rumbles of thunder, and eventually they're going to become wintry over those northern hills. The big thing about tomorrow, I think, is that it's going to be windy, and that wind is going to make it feel quite a bit colder. A chilly day on Monday with some showers in the east, some more rain coming in from the northwest. A very good night to you.
Keith Wood can run the 100 metres in 12 seconds. His neck can take the weight of 8 men. But Keith is a hooker. In a high wind and with a slippery ball, he has to hit a spot 25 feet away and 11 foot off the ground. He practices by throwing against the upright of a goalpost. And he practices over and over and over again.
Sport gets dangerous with Jasper Carrott here on BBC One at 10 to 12 after Match of the Day with Desmond Lynham.